Hello there, and welcome back to the LightKit Pro 3 training video series. In this video, we're going to be talking about the LightKit Studio object. Now, I've got a pretty clean basic scene here. I've got a bunch of different lights ready to light up. I've got a couple of different psychs where it's got a pedestal and this backdrop, and I've got the model of a monster. I've got the scene set up for Redshift. All of these lights are currently in the Redshift render mode. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. This could just as easily be one of the other renderers. I'm going to pop it open. Let's hit play. It's going to have to initialize, loading a bunch of geometry and feeding the initial pass of the shaders. But there we go. We are now interactively able to take a look at what we've got here. Now, important thing to note that I haven't mentioned yet is that LightKit was designed to look really, all of our previews, all of our looks, everything's got GI turned on. So we've got 5 bounces of GI. In Redshift, we got 5 bounces. I got the settings cranked up a little bit. But that is ready to rock right there with 5 bounces. So let's talk about the LightKit Studio object. So let's go ahead and click on our drop down here, the one with the lights, and we can click on the LightKit Studio object. And it just goes ahead and creates that. And by itself, it's only got a handful of parameters. But what you're going to want to do with your LightKit Studio is grab any lights that you've created and drop them as a child of it. It's kind of a null to store all of your lights. But now that I've done that, let's go ahead and just put our IPR up here to be viewing it directly. Now we've got that. We've got a couple of controls that we can do. First of all, we can load the browser directly from it. And another thing that's useful is you can go ahead and double click the LightKit Studio, and that will actually pop open the browser for quick access to that if you're swapping between different studios. Next up, we've got the renderer. So we can actually change what renderer we're running through all of these lights, all the children lights, just by changing this parent. In fact, if you click on one of these lights, you'll see it's grayed out now because it's being controlled by the parent light. Now, the first setting we get is a global scale. This can be incredibly useful if your scene is built at a different size. Let's say, in fact, why don't we go ahead and even put these 2 psychs as children of it, because it's designed to work with that. Let's say that we had our little monster fella, and he's very high poly. I'm going to hit T for scale, and we're going to make him pretty big. No, I should probably stop the IPR while I'm scaling. All right, there we go. We got this big old monster guy. He's too big for what we have set up. We can just go ahead to our LightKit Studio, and I can click our global scale, and I can start dragging it up, and everything is going to uniformly scale up, and the lighting will be maintained. The lighting will not be changing at all. In fact, we could have left that on, but the lighting will not change at all. It's just going to scale and adapt to the size of your scene as you scale it up or down. In addition to that, we've now got a global intensity. So all the lights that are children, we can increase the overall brightness of all of those lights and really start cranking up that overall brightness. Blow it out a little too much there if we want, but just a little extra brightness, that can go a long way. In addition to that, we have our temperature. So we could, whoa. So we could go ahead and grab our temperature, and it's kind of on a warm, cool Kelvin type scale. We can go ahead and start pulling this down. So pull it down, you see it's going to get warmer and warmer, and we can pull it up and tint everything into the cool range and make it a little bit cooler. So these are great things to tweak when you're playing with one of our built-in presets. You're like, you know what, that's great, but I want it just a little bit warmer, and I want it a little bit brighter. In addition to that, we also have a global tint. So instead of making it warmer or cooler, let's say you want to push it maybe a little bit into the green range. That will also multiply on top of the final colored lights. Another thing that's cool is you'll see as I was changing this temperature and the tint, our icons are changing to reflect it. These lights have actually turned into these particular colors. So we go ahead and add in some extra blue here, and you're going to see all of those change. Of course, we're multiplying that color, so we got to brighten it up a little bit more, make that brighter, and now we've got a completely different look there. The next setting would be the ceiling height. That would be us showing, that would be kind of globally changing the height of these stands. So right now it's kind of set universally, but I can click it override and set it to an absolute amount. Let's go ahead and change this over to like 2000. And you're going to see it jump up to that other height. This is quite a large scene now, so let's go ahead with a very big number. And you can see it's overriding all those and jumping to a new height. Lastly here, we've got adapt brightness to scale. And like I said, as I was scaling the scene, it was not changing the lighting. It kind of looked exactly the same as it got bigger and smaller. If you turn that off, the lighting will get brighter as it scales up. So typically I would never turn that off, but it's pretty useful if you need it. And then we just have another shortcut here to create additional lights. If I want another softbox, I can click on that, and I've got a new softbox ready to be changed and manipulated however I want. And we can make it a child of the Light Kit Studio, and it is completely ready to rock and contribute to the overall scene. Now, there is a lot more to talk about with the Light Kit Studio object in regards to saving out presets. And we're going to cover this in the browser video and the preset creation video, but I think it's important to note that I can go ahead and close this down, and we can go ahead and open up our browser. And a very important feature in this version of Light Kit is the ability for you to create presets that you're going to save into the browser. And those will be stored into the user menu. Now, the way this works, in fact, it will tell you exactly how it works, is if I click Save Studio, it's going to pop up with this message telling you everything I'm about to tell you. And that is, when it's saving a studio, it's going to save a file, and that file is only going to save the things that are a child of the Light Kit Studio object. So this monster isn't in that Light Kit Studio, so that won't be saved. So if you're making your own, let's say, a really nice lighting preset for a product you're working on, you don't want to save the bottle or the can inside the preset, because now every time you go to use that preset, that bottle is going to load in. So you can leave that outside of the Light Kit Studio. Also, it's going to adapt to be 16:9, and the current settings will be saved in whatever your current render settings are. Those are what are going to be used. So I can go ahead and say, yes, I want to use this, and whatever my current point of view is, whatever my current render settings are, that's what's going to be used. So I'm going to just call this Cool Monster. Hit OK, and my current render settings are going to run and render a thumbnail. And if I've got the 5 bounces and my settings cranked up pretty high, so that might take a second to calculate. But yeah, there we go, it's done. And if we go and click, the current POV I was sitting at is what is going to be rendered, which actually isn't that good. So it'd probably be better to zoom way up on our little monster fella here. And actually, this is a fine thing to mention for making this mistake. I can just right click and delete my user studio and then save the studio again. And go ahead and call it Cool Monster. Boom. And now we're going to let that one chug along for a second, hopefully create a nice thumbnail for us on our overall monster guy as soon as this rendering thumbnail pops up. Boop, that's done. And then boom, our cool monster. I seem like I've got my camera in a way where I'm cropping that off because I didn't do it, but nice 16:9 crop off, and that is ready to load. Now, well, once again, with the studio object, we use this in a lot of different ways when it's involved in the browser. If I were to jump to these pop studios, I can go ahead and double click on the Candy Studio, and what it's going to do is find my existing studio. Remember, we scaled our studio up? It is actually finding the scaled up studio and replacing it with its position, scale, and rotation. So we've adapted to this object. We only had to do that one time. So just to make it even a little bit more blatant if we wanted to, I could go ahead and grab our overall studio, which we already scaled up, and I can move it off to the side, and I can rotate it. And now we could go ahead and, our monster's not there anymore, but you know what? A new monster is going to load in with it anyway. I can go ahead and double click on something like Portrait 4, and you're going to see without me changing my camera here that that has now appeared in that position right at that 0, 0, 0, and everything's adapted to that scale, that position, that rotation. Very important, and that's based off of it looking for your studio object. Now, just a couple additional clarifications here. If you click on your settings tab, then you're going to see that we have a couple different settings in here that are pretty important. One is that we can override the current studio, and that's currently on, and that's important. But let's say you wanted to be able to keyframe one studio and another. If we turn that off and double click to make an additional studio, then it's actually just going to ignore the current one and just make a second studio in an unrelated location back at 0. In addition to that, when we're loading these in, it's also loading the stands, loading the cyc, and it's automatically linking to the camera. That if we put a camera inside of the studio object and we save it, the camera will automatically link to that. And it's automatically loading this monster character in. So, because we have that load model, and we have whichever setting we want in there. So I could turn it to spheres, and spheres will load. Otherwise, I typically keep all these checkboxes on, but that will create a second studio, and the other one will automatically be turned off. So I think that should pretty much cover everything involved in the Light Kit Studio object, a really handy way of controlling all the lights that are a child, and a quick way of your browser being able to adapt to your scene without you having to reposition, rescale, and re-rotate your lights every single time you just try a different preset. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.